5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everyone. CTS Podcast episode.
I've got it labeled as 67, but
Episode
doesn't matter.
67.
Doesn't matter. So, big one this week. We missed last week because we were in a period of mourning. The Queen of England died.
Yeah.
What, last Friday?
GG.
Was it? So, I mean, for one, that's crazy because, like, she's been the queen for so long. Like, she's been the queen for, like, our parents' lives. Like, our entire parents' lives, let alone, like...
Grandparents,
yeah,
almost.
grandparents, almost. So, yeah, I mean, that's a wild one. That, you were like, it had to happen eventually, but for...
It seems that, well, what's funny is there's a lot of conspiracy theorists that are saying, you know, I've seen all these posts that are like, oh, it has happened now the, you know, the next big thing is going to happen soon, the queen is gone. And it's like,
what does that even mean? What?
Yeah, I've seen so many posts like that, but
No.
it's just funny because I mean, she was
96.
she's the oldest leader in the world.
Yeah.
She was.
Yeah.
I
Oldest
mean-
head of state.
Yeah.
Well, and she's King Charles is the oldest to ever take over as monarch in history.
So let me get your opinion on this. So on the day of her death,
Mm-hmm.
there was protests on, you know, people celebrating her death, which I think it's kind of weird to celebrate anyone's death unless they're like evil. But there's people in England that were holding posters and, you know, celebrating her death, and there's people getting arrested for
That
it.
one's a crazy one. Like, I don't care what like it's in poor taste, whatever, but to be arresting people for, like, because it wasn't, if the posters were blatantly they weren't even blatantly disrespectful. It was just
Well, even if
end
they
the
were.
monarchy, and even if they were, because I mean, the argument they made is it's like public nuisance or whatever, like inciting whatever is like what they were arrested for.
It's like the equivalent of disorderly conduct in the
yeah,
United States,
so-
or what are they called? Like breaking the peace or disturbing the
Mhm.
peace.
Yeah. So it's wild that they were getting. I mean, did you see the video of the dude? I think, and this is slightly different because I think he was yelling something about. No, this might have been the one. I think he was yelling something about, oh, like King Charles, like people are like can't heat their houses or cool their houses.
I saw that
because,
video.
and then he just gets yanked away. I mean, it looks like, what was it? Somebody made a comparison in the video I saw that, but he just gets like the start of Jaws when that lady gets like yanked underwater. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well,
it looks like that.
it's just funny because if you remember in Russia,
Yeah.
they were, you know, you can't hold up posters,
And everyone was
there's
like,
people
"Oh my gosh!"
there's people
the
literally
blank
holding
posters.
blank pieces of paper and getting
Mhm.
arrested. And
Yeah.
it's a weird one because if they're talking about the prime minister like that, Liz
You're
Truss,
fine.
it would have been fine.
Yeah.
So it is weird that they were getting arrested for that. But then again, Britain has, you know, they don't have necessarily free speech, at least like we do. I
Yeah.
think, because I think the United States probably has the most stringent protections on free speech anywhere in the world.
Probably.
I would think so, because I mean, you can literally say pretty much anything you want in the United States.
Yeah, short of inciting violence.
Yeah. Which I think is good. I mean, I personally wouldn't celebrate the Queen's death like that, but
Well,
then
I
again,
mean-
I definitely think they should be allowed to. And it's weird to say that it's just like this completely protected head of state or executive that you can't even criticize them.
Well, yeah. Remember all the protests when like Trump got elected? I mean, massive protests all over the country, all over the world, to be honest. The fact that people are like, okay, end the monarchy, and are getting arrested for, I mean, not even really super vocally protesting, just like holding up a sign is a little yikes.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the monarchy isn't real. I mean, it's not. They have no real political power.
And I mean, well, what's crazy is how much, I mean, functionally they have no political power, but technically they still have like a ton of, I think we've talked about this before, that like the head of state can just be like,
Yeah, they can
just
still
veto
dissolve,
a law.
They
can
still
dissolve parliament.
Parliament if they wanted to. I mean, obviously, I think
They won't, and the
think they'd be
monarchy would
killed.
immediately end
Yeah.
but while we're on the subject, I think, and this you can maybe agree with me or not, I think the last English monarch has already been born.
I think we talked about this a while back.
Maybe off the podcast.
How we thought Elizabeth might be. Well, I think Elizabeth might be like the last real monarch that's given any level of real respect. I mean,
Well, and I don't even mean respect. I think they dissolve the monarchy within the lifetime of heirs that are already alive.
could do.
Could you imagine in like 50 years when it's like Prince George, like the kid that's like 6 right now? Could you imagine? I mean, in 50 years for people to be 3 heads of state on from Queen Elizabeth, it feels archaic to still have that system. And all the people I've seen supporting the monarchy in England are like 70 years old.
Well, what's funny is, and I should have sent you this video, but there's this TV clip of this show. I think it's called Royals, or it's something like that, where the king in the show,
He walks in and dissolves parliament.
Yeah, but the comments were like, some of the comments were like, I wish this would actually happen. Our country would be so much better if it happened. I'm like,
That's just trolls. I think that's legitimately Russian bots. Like, I think that's legitimately just the Russian Twitter bots or TikTok bots.
Dude, it's like, what?
It just feels, it's a weird system. I mean, I was just there this summer, and we were up in Scotland, we went to Windsor, and it's wild walking through just like all these palaces, all this stuff. Because a lot of the palaces, I mean, we went to the one in Edinburgh, like Holyrood House it's called, where they'll spend time at in Scotland, and Windsor they'll spend time at. And it's like, it's crazy that there's this huge family of people that are all, they didn't do anything. I mean, literally by function of like, just, it's weird. And you can make the argument like there's situations like that today without a monarchy. Like, a lot of wealthy people are wealthy because they were just born wealthy. But it is weird that, oh, there's this giant palace with all these like treasures, like,
One, it's funded by the taxpayers, right?
and it's, yeah, that's the other thing that's bad, right? Because I mean, a wealthy like business magnate, you're like, okay, well, they have some company that funds the trust fund for their kids and grandkids and great grandkids. This is taxpayer funded, and it's a lot. It's like hundreds of millions a year.
Yeah, it's it's kind of funny, and the royal family is exempt from the inheritance tax in England, which is 40%.
40%. So, and
Ooh.
that's a massive fortune. I mean, it's literally, I think I was seeing, who was it? Prince Harry will get $100 million a year, like stipend or something.
Well, yeah, and I mean, think of just the jewels and artifacts of the palaces and the properties themselves. We're talking billions and billions.
Well, I've
of
seen
dollars.
estimates that it's trillions.
Really?
Yeah. Just, I mean, which is a lot, but I mean, you got to think how much stuff do they own? I mean, you go to Windsor or Buckingham Palace or whatever, and it's just tons of like paintings, artifacts. I mean, yeah, it's wild. It's a really weird system.
Well, one thing that we should talk about is it's being reported. So all these heads of states got invited to the funeral, and it's being reported that Biden will be the most heavily protected of anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being reported that he'll have 300 Secret Service members or other protection agents.
And
300.
We talked about this off the podcast a little bit, but it's like you feel like when you get that many heads of state together, like there's kind of a herd immunity. Like if everyone brings 15, 20 Secret Service agents, whole group's good. We're all good.
300 is like, at some point or another, you're more likely to get someone in there that doesn't like Biden than like, it's like, I don't know. And you've got to think they're going to have like probably snipers on every rooftop. They're going to have, all of this stuff has to happen. And Biden is going to be, I think, the only world leader, or one of the only world leaders that's going to be able to fly into, he's going to take not Air Force One. What's the helicopter called?
Wow, I'm totally blanking.
I can't remember what the helicopter's called. But he's going to fly into that and then take the Beast, which is, that armored car into, the funeral. Have you seen any videos on that? Like all the tech and stuff that's on that Cadillac?
Yeah.
It's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
The windows are like this thick. There's the president's blood on board. There's anti-chemical warfare systems.
I haven't seen that stuff.
Oh, you have? It's really interesting.
So they can like transfuse him with blood if he gets.
They keep his blood on board. It can withstand, several RPG blasts. The tires are puncture proof. It can sustain if a chemical bomb was dropped. It has its own supply of oxygen. It's crazy.
Weird. You'd think you'd have bigger problems than. It's like you'd think if that stuff happened, that was like an eventuality to protect him from. You've got bigger problems than what's going on inside the single car.
Yeah, you would think, but yeah, it's weird.
Back to the Queen's funeral. Have you seen the line to see her coffin?
It's like people were waiting in line for days.
Like 2 days. How? Well, and you see like David Beckham. He waited for 12 hours. Like with just regular people. Like he didn't cut the line or anything. He just waited for 12 hours.
Really?
Yeah. The funeral's going to be wild. We're recording this Sunday. The funerals will be tomorrow. It's going to be like maybe the biggest event ever. Like in history.
Yeah. There's only a few countries not invited to send people or to attend the funeral. I think it's Russia.
Probably Russia's, North Korea maybe.
Bulgaria.
That's a weird one.
Maybe not. Maybe it wasn't Bulgaria. Maybe it was, I don't know. It's weird countries like that. But yeah, China's sending the vice president. They're not sending Xi.
She's not going. He'd have more than 300 bodyguards.
Going. Yeah, probably.
Probably even just to like one up the U.S.
Yeah.
I'm bringing 600 bodyguards. What?
Are they live streaming it? Or is it like a private thing?
I don't know.
I'd kind of like to see everyone in there.
They'll for sure, if you go to BBC, there'll be cameras inside for sure. I don't know if they'll live stream it, but there'll at least be video like afterwards.
Biden's not speaking, is he?
No.
I wouldn't.
I don't think so. That'd be a weird one. I bet they don't do. I bet King Charles speaks. Maybe. Who's the one that's like in line for the front throne? William. Because
Harry
probably speaks.
Harry and what's his wife's name?
Meghan.
Meghan. They aren't being given, the royal treatment except for a few photos that they're going to do.
Which they kind of asked for that, right?
Yeah. What's funny is they're still getting so much like slack and criticism for them kind of stepping away from the royal family and doing
British people are weird about that stuff, man. No offense to any British people listening to us, but
full offense from me.
That's true. That's true. But there's some people that are weird about that stuff, and we both like from soccer. We read like British tabloids, like we see British tabloids and stuff for soccer news, and there's just some weird things that they get upset about. I saw one that was like Meghan didn't go up to Scotland to like be with the family like right after the Queen died because she was staying with the kids, and people were like, oh my gosh, like she's not going, like that's so disrespectful or whatever. But neither was Kate, who's like Prince William's wife. Yeah, Prince William's wife. And it was like, oh, well, yeah, it's weird.
You know what's funny too is Harry is one of the only ones that actually served in the military.
Yeah, and he was like legit served in the military.
Like legit.
Like 2 tours in Afghanistan or whatever.
Yeah, and he's not even being given, like the royal honors or whatever. It's just funny the amount of, people saying, "Oh, he's not a true Brit," or
They
all
do
these
still
things
they do still take money from the royal family.
Do
Even
they?
in the form, I don't know if they're taking like money, but they are like utilizing like houses and palaces and stuff that the royal family own to like when they're living in England and stuff like that. So yeah, no, it's British people are crazy about that stuff, but I seriously think within like the next 2 monarchs they'll get rid of it.
It'll be interesting to see.
Because there's no excuse in like modern times to have a hereditary group funded like hundreds of millions of dollars by taxpayers.
Well, I think maybe we're a little bit biased because we're Americans, but I mean, you have to think like the royal family is so a part of that culture, right? I mean, even us, I mean, we still, and politicians still quote the founding fathers, and we have the Constitution.
Yeah, but
which
we're also not like George Washington's great grandson isn't getting $200 million a year because they funded and they offered it to George Washington. Remember? Am I recalling it wrong, or is this like a weird like Schoolhouse Rock thing that like isn't actually true? That they offered him to be like for George Washington to be king.
I've heard rumors like that. Yeah, that they offered him something.
Your sources have told you that.
Yeah.
Behind closed doors talks, they offered him the kingship.
I don't know. That's a crazy thought that we would have gone to battle to.
But could you imagine if George Washington's like great grandson was getting paid like hundreds of millions of dollars, if when he died we were making it a national holiday, and like that would be weird. And granted, maybe it's a little biased from an American perspective, but I think a lot of young people are not huge fans of the monarchy, and we'll probably see, I don't know, it's weird because you see stuff online, and online is not a great representation of what the general majority of people think, but if it is even a semblance of a good representation, I think that most people don't, or a lot of young people do not like the idea of having a monarchy.
I don't.
Well, we don't have a monarchy, Chase.
Yeah, but I still don't like it.
Just grind your gears. You wake up every morning, still has a monarchy.
So moving on to American politics, which is incredibly more interesting. Right?
In general, this one feels like a pretty big event, like regardless of that might take precedent. But that's why we spent a bunch of time talking about it. So
yeah. So Senator Hirono, who is from Hawaii, came up to voice her dissent on a bill that was introduced by Lindsey Graham that's a nationwide abortion ban after 15 weeks. And she used these words, and she used them more than once, which is like, you use them kind of off the cuff. Maybe you take it as, simple. I can't even think of the word, but
like you misspoke or something, or
yeah. And she called this a call to arms, and it's really funny that you hear all of these pundits say this inflammatory language is inciting.
Are we not still litigating January 6th?
Right. This incendiary language is inciting a revolution. It's inciting people to violence.
Yeah.
And she called it a call to arms, and it's like, well, aren't you?
Well, were those not the exact words Trump used? Like, that's pretty much what Trump said.
Yeah.
So I don't and is either one right for doing that? Probably not. But you can't, like, one way we're literally litigating January 6th still. I mean, we're what? Like, was that just this year? No, that was last year, right?
Yeah,
It was
January
last
6th,
year.
2021.
We're over a year past it. We're like 18 months past it, and we're still dealing with that stuff. It's a little like the Mueller report thing.
Yeah, and I think me and you look at January 6th a little bit differently, because I think it was like one of the worst things to happen to our government, like since like the Civil War. But I don't know.
I think so, and I'll not to cut you off. I think the event was really bad. I think where we disagree a little bit was like how culpable you can hold Trump for what he said. Like if he's entirely culpable. So now, right, with this senator from Hawaii, does that mean if there's riots, if this like comes up and there's riots and anybody gets hurt, he's culpable for it?
She.
Sorry. She's culpable for it. Right? Because that's the logic that's being used with January 6th.
It's really weird. And I don't know. I actually think the language itself isn't bad when you're trying to like express a point, but it's the fact that the other side has been saying that language was responsible for, it was that kind of language that incited January 6th.
Well, your side, right? Like her side is saying that
right,
language was responsible
right.
for January 6th. So it's like, you don't get to go. Yeah, it's the exact same thing. So if there's something like bad, if something bad happens, then you're kind of, you can't really go back. You have to try and litigate that the same way you're litigating January 6th.
Yeah. We only have 2 more months until the midterms too, which is kind of crazy. In Utah, obviously, we're pretty confident that Mike Lee's going to win.
It's closer than it's been in the past.
It's been getting closer, it feels like, every election.
McMullen, right, in the last polls, which granted those typically favor
Democrats, almost
Democrat
always.
/ independent candidates, but he's ahead of Mike Lee
in
the polls.
Yeah, Mike Lee's
by like 1 or 2 points.
Mike Lee's gonna win.
But if it's close, that's kind of a big deal in Utah.
Yeah.
If people would rather vote for an independent than a Republican in a state that's been red for ever. Since like FDR.
Dude, I don't know if you've heard about this race, but this one's killer. So in Oregon, there is a Republican candidate, Democratic candidate, and an independent. And the independent is way left, and you have the Democrat that's, more left or center left. And the independent is making the race really, really close. So there is legitimately concern that a Republican governor is going to win Oregon, which is by far one of the most liberal states in the nation.
Would be wild.
But this independent is
splitting the Democrat
vote, and it's really, really close right now.
You think, at what point do you go, because the independent, and I'm not super familiar with this race, is the independent like close to winning? Is it like a 3-way split? Or is
no. The independent is like 8 points below the other two, but she's still holding 25% of the total vote.
So at what point is that, like, independent candidate, do you go, well, having a Republican governor is way worse?
You would think, but it's kind of the same argument of people that didn't vote for Hillary because they voted for Bernie Sanders, or they wrote Bernie Sanders in. And I'm always like, if I don't like either two of the people running, I won't vote for either of them. I'll put someone else in always.
And that's what, it's a little, to me, it feels a little different than that, because like that race shouldn't be close, right? That race should be, the Democrat candidate should
by 15
by a mile. Whereas the presidential race,
points.
it's like, okay, if Bernie Sanders took 1% of the vote and that's the difference, then like fine. I mean, if Hillary was going to win by like 70-30, but Bernie's taking 30% of the vote, so it's close, then that's more comparable to this situation. That's a weird one. I hadn't heard about that.
It's really interesting, yeah. So we'll see what happens there. It'd be crazy to see a Republican governor in Oregon.
How? It's weird that can happen.
It's so crazy. It's really cool. I think I would love if there was another party in the United States.
Well, and it's weird because you'd want a party that, it's hard because you get the problem with, okay, well, if the party's in the middle, like right down the middle, then I guess it takes voters from both parties. But the way the system's set up, you kind of can't have another party
You won't.
either further right or further left, because then the other party would always win that stays like united. So I don't know. That'd be fun. That'd be a funny one.
It'd be so funny.
People would be so mad. Do you know how mad people? I mean, people were so mad at Bernie for not dropping out, and he took like 2% of the vote. I mean, it was like such a small portion, and in a race that was already like not that, or it was like close. So I don't know. Like it was a toss up, not this one that should be a sure thing for Democrats. Yeah, that would be a funny one.
It'd be so funny. But yeah, that one's going to be really interesting. It looks like the Dems are going to hold on to the Senate, which is really interesting. But the Republicans are going to take the House. So how crazy is it that the Speaker of the House is third in line for the presidency? Isn't that so weird? I just, it's like, it makes sense, but it is weird that it goes down to the Speaker of the House if the president and vice president both die.
Because it's not, because that's not like a generally elected person, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's one district in one
Mhm.
state decides the speaker. Like,
Well, and then the House has to vote on them to make them
but
speaker.
it's typically
so,
the most senior, like, person in the party.
Mhm.
So like, so I guess it doesn't quite. Yeah, it's just like, okay, so one district in California votes for Nancy Pelosi, and she's president. It would be, yeah. So that is wild. Any other big political news this week before we wrap up?
Trying to think. I don't really think so. I think Ukraine has taken a bunch of
Oh yeah.
they've started a counteroffensive which is being reported to be very successful. It's really hard to get a good read on that, whether it's being super successful or not. It seems like
It's at least moderately successful, right? Because they have control of cities they didn't have control of before. So
yeah, and one thing that was really interesting, and this is probably just propaganda, but it was reported that at a summit that Putin and Xi both attended, Xi is very, very concerned with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and is like disappointed in Putin's handling of the whole situation. Because I'm sure Putin had communicated that we're going to go in.
It's easy. It's going to be quick.
We're going to go in. We're going to
it.
take it. It's going to be done.
Well, because there's the places that Ukraine, because originally Russia's thing that they were saying is, hey, we just want this, like the Donbass region, I think it's called. And with Ukraine, like taking what they've taken back, he won't even get that.
No.
So it'll be a complete and total failure, which is, I mean, he's got to be like not have long left for him to be doing something crazy like this.
Yeah. There's an old quote that is a failed man is the scariest man. And so it'll be interesting to see if he does any more.
It's like he's played his hand, though, it feels like. I mean, it feels like it's not like short of doing something absolutely insane. He's kind of already lost.
He'd have to sacrifice his whole country if he were to do something insane. Because it seems like China is already...
They're distancing themselves, and I think in a direct conflict where it was everyone else in the world against Russia, I don't think China is standing with Russia to try and even it out.
I don't think they'll stand with Russia. I think they'll just remain neutral. They won't do anything. Which, if you're China, is probably the best play right now. I mean, their geopolitical sort of policies have seemed to have really worked, except for maybe Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, where she called their bluff. That was like,
Granted, yeah. I mean, yeah, that'd be, well, not interesting to see. Hopefully we don't get in a situation where it's like,
no, it would be interesting though. It would be interesting. Would it not?
Yeah, okay. As a thought experiment.
Yeah, as a hypothetical
experiment. But yeah, so okay, want to wrap this one up?
Let's do it. CTS Podcast, episode 67. Henry's new hair.